It was supposed to be the happiest night of my life, the night every little girl dreams of, white dress, candlelight, the promise of forever. But forever didn't even last until midnight. He left me right after the guests were gone. No note, no explanation, just silence. The room felt too big, too quiet, like even the walls knew something I didn't. And then, as the clock struck 12, I heard it, faint at first, like whispers behind the walls. A woman's voice. Then a low hum. Then footsteps that didn't belong to me. That was the moment I realized my husband wasn't the only one who had secrets that night. They thought I was asleep, that I would never hear, never see. But they had no idea what I was capable of. By the end of the night, they would learn that betrayal comes with a price, and I was ready to make them pay. The morning of my wedding felt like something out of a dream I'd been having since I was a child. The sun was gentle, the sky open and endless, and the scent of lilies floated through the air like a blessing. I could hear laughter coming from downstairs, bridesmaids rushing, someone calling for a missing bouquet, my mother's soft voice reminding everyone to keep calm. Everything looked perfect. Every detail, every color, every smile. But even then, deep in the pit of my stomach, something felt wrong. It wasn't the usual kind of nerves. It was quieter, heavier, like the stillness before a storm. When I caught my reflection in the mirror, I almost didn't recognize myself. My face was glowing, but my eyes looked uncertain. Maybe it was just the exhaustion from weeks of planning. Maybe it was because Daniel hadn't called the night before like he promised. He said it was bad luck to talk before the wedding. I believed him, or maybe I just wanted to. By noon, the church bells began to ring. I remember standing at the entrance, my father beside me, his arm trembling slightly as he prepared to give me away. The aisle looked endless, covered in white petals, lined with the faces of people who had watched me grow up. When the doors opened, everyone stood, and all eyes turned toward me. But my eyes went straight to him. Daniel looked devastatingly handsome, standing at the altar in a dark suit that fit him like it had been made for this very moment. Yet something about him was distant. He smiled, but the smile didn't touch his eyes. His expression was calm, too calm, as if he were performing rather than feeling. I told myself I was overthinking. He was just nervous. Everyone gets nervous on their wedding day, right? As I walked down the aisle, our eyes locked, and for a fleeting moment, I saw something flicker in his face. Fear, maybe? Or guilt? I couldn't tell. But it was gone before I reached him. When my father handed me over, Daniel leaned in, brushed his lips against my cheek, and whispered, "You look beautiful." It should have made me melt. Instead, it made my heart twist. There was a tremor in his voice. The ceremony moved fast, almost too fast. The vows, the rings, the applause. When the priest finally said, "You may kiss the bride," he hesitated for a split second. It was subtle, but I felt it. His lips touched mine like he was fulfilling an obligation, not a promise. During the reception, everyone said we were the picture of happiness, the perfect couple, the perfect wedding. We danced, laughed, and posed for pictures. But beneath the music and champagne, I could sense a chill coming from him. Whenever he thought no one was watching, his expression would fall blank, cold, and distracted. Once, I caught him staring toward the exit doors, his jaw clenched tight, as if he was waiting for something, or someone. When I tried to ask if he was okay, he smiled that same polite smile and said, "Just tired, my love." It's been a long day. He kissed my forehead, and I wanted to believe him so badly that I smiled back. I had no idea that those were the last words he'd say to me for the rest of the night. By the time the last guests had left and the music had faded, it was close to midnight. The driver dropped us off at the old country inn we'd booked for our first night as husband and wife. The place looked like something from a fairy tale, ivy crawling up stone walls, candlelight flickering through lace-draped windows. Daniel carried my suitcase inside, his expression unreadable. "You go ahead and freshen up," he said softly. "I just need to check something with the manager." I didn't think much of it then. I went to the vanity, unpinned my hair, and stared at my reflection again. The makeup was fading, but I still looked like a bride, like someone who had just stepped into a new life. Minutes passed, then an hour. The clock on the wall ticked louder with each passing second. I sent him a message, no reply. I called his phone. It rang once, then went silent. My chest began to tighten. I stepped outside the room and looked down the hallway, but it was empty. The inn was quiet except for the wind brushing against the windows. That was when I felt the first crack in my world. He wasn't coming back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. My husband, the man I had promised forever to, had left me alone on our wedding night. And just as the clock struck 12, the silence broke. Faint at first, a sound like whispers, or breathing, coming from somewhere beyond the walls. I froze, my heart pounding. It wasn't Daniel. It wasn't the wind. It was something else. Something alive. In that moment, surrounded by flickering candles and unanswered questions, I realized the wedding was never meant to be perfect. It was the beginning of a nightmare I hadn't seen coming. The first few seconds after hearing that sound felt endless. I held my breath, my hand hovering above the nightstand lamp, afraid that even a flicker of light might disturb whatever was lurking in the dark. My heart was thudding so loud I could almost hear it echo in the stillness of the room. Then, there it was again, a low, muffled sound, somewhere beyond the door. It wasn't a voice, not exactly, but something about it felt human. It was as if someone was whispering through clenched teeth, close but trying not to be heard. I rose slowly, my wedding gown brushing against the floor like a whisper of its own. Every instinct told me to stay put, to wait for Daniel to come back, to tell me I was imagining things. But Daniel wasn't here. He hadn't been for nearly 2 hours. I reached for the lamp and turned it on. The soft yellow glow pushed back the shadows, but the unease stayed. My phone was on the dresser, screen dark. I picked it up, no messages, no missed calls. I dialed his number again, praying to hear his voice, even if only to say he was fine. This time, it didn't ring at all. It went straight to voicemail. My hands started to shake. I left the room, barefoot, walking down the corridor lined with old portraits that seemed to follow me with their eyes. The air smelled faintly of lavender and damp wood. Somewhere below, I heard a door creak. "Daniel?" I called out, my voice breaking in the middle of his name. No answer. The staircase moaned beneath my weight as I descended. The lobby lights were dimmed, leaving long shadows across the floor. At the far end of the hall, a faint light flickered from a half-open door. I moved toward it, the fabric of my dress catching on the edges of the wooden floor. My pulse quickened with each step. Inside, the sound grew clearer, a rustling, like fabric brushing against fabric, and then a sharp, low gasp. I froze at the doorway. For a moment, I couldn't move. My mind tried to make sense of it, to turn it into something ordinary, but deep down I already knew. I pushed the door open. The room was small, lined with mirrors on one side, like an old dressing area. The light came from a single lamp on a side table. And there he was, Daniel. Still in his wedding suit, his back turned to me, but he wasn't alone. A woman stood in front of him, tall, dark hair spilling over her shoulders, wearing a silk robe that shimmered under the light. She looked at me first, her eyes widening, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her mouth as if she had been waiting for me. Daniel turned around, his face draining of color. "Clara," he started, but I didn't let him finish. "What is this?" My voice came out sharper than I intended, trembling with disbelief. "What are you doing here?" He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The woman, however, didn't hesitate. "We didn't think you'd come looking," she said softly, her tone cruelly calm. "It's late. You should be in bed." Something inside me snapped. I felt a heat rise from my chest to my throat. a mix of humiliation and heartbreak so heavy it almost took my breath away. "Who is she, Daniel?" I demanded. He stepped forward, reaching for me, but I stepped back. "Please," he said, "it's not what you think." "Really?" "Because it looks exactly like what I think." He glanced at the woman, and in that fleeting moment, I saw it again, that same expression he'd worn at the altar, the one that had haunted me all day: distance, guilt, maybe even relief. Without another word, I turned and ran. My bare feet hit the cold floor, tears burning in my eyes as I stumbled back to our room. Behind me, I heard him calling my name, but I didn't stop. When I slammed the door shut and locked it, I finally let the sobs come. The dress, the flowers, the promises, they all felt like a cruel joke now. Outside, the clock struck 1. The whispering had stopped, but the silence it left behind was even worse. It wasn't just the sound of betrayal echoing in that room. It was the sound of something breaking inside me, something that would never fully heal again. Morning came slowly, dragging its light across the room like a confession. The sun slipped through the sheer curtains, landing on the abandoned champagne flutes, the wilted bouquet, and the dress pooled at my feet like a defeated ghost. I hadn't slept. My eyes burned, my throat was raw, and my heart, well, it wasn't there anymore. It had left the moment I heard that laugh echo through the hallway. I sat on the floor, knees to my chest, still in the same position I'd crumpled into hours ago. My wedding ring caught the light, its shine mocking me. I twisted it on my finger, wondering how something so small could suddenly feel like a shackle. The vows we exchanged, words that once felt sacred, played on a loop in my head. "For better or worse," he'd said, smiling just enough for the camera. I should have known. His smiles never reached his eyes anymore. There was a knock on the door. Soft, hesitant. I didn't move. Another knock. Then his voice, low, careful, almost rehearsed. "Juliet, please, open the door." For a second, I almost did. Old habits die hard, and forgiveness used to come too easily to me. But then I remembered the sound of her laugh, how it danced through the hallway like a cruel echo of what I thought love was. My body went rigid. I couldn't face him, not yet, maybe not ever. He knocked again. "We need to talk." I let out a small, humorless laugh. Talk. That word had lost its meaning long before last night. We'd been talking for months, hadn't we? About wedding colors, guest lists, flower arrangements, everything but the one thing that mattered. The growing distance between us, the secrets, the lies. After a while, his voice faded, the sound of footsteps retreating down the hall. Silence returned, thick and suffocating. I finally stood up, legs trembling, and walked toward the mirror. My reflection looked worse in daylight, makeup smeared, eyes swollen, hair tangled. The woman staring back looked like she'd just attended a funeral. Maybe she had. I peeled off the ring and set it on the table. The sound it made when it hit the glass surface was small, almost delicate, but it shattered many more things in me. I packed my things slowly, one dress, one pair of heels, and the invitation with our names printed in gold. I folded it carefully, then tore it in half. When I opened the door to leave, the hallway was empty, the air still heavy with the ghost of last night. I passed his suite without looking, but I felt the pull, the ache of wanting answers I already knew. I didn't need to see his face to understand. Whatever he was going to say would never change the truth. Downstairs, the receptionist looked at me with wide, uncertain eyes. I smiled faintly, though it felt foreign on my lips. "Checking out early," I said. As I stepped outside, the morning air hit my face, cold and clean. For the first time in months, I could breathe. But with every breath came the quiet grief of realizing that the perfect day I had dreamed of had never existed. It had been a story I told myself to survive a love that was already gone. I didn't go home right away. The thought of stepping into that apartment, our apartment, made my stomach twist. Every corner held pieces of him, of us, of what I thought was love. So instead, I wandered. The morning bled into afternoon as I walked through streets I barely recognized, carrying my small overnight bag and the weight of a dream that had turned to dust overnight. By noon, I found myself at the pier where we'd taken our engagement photos. The wooden boards were slick from the rain the night before, the air sharp with salt. I sat on a bench overlooking the gray water, my dress wrinkled and stained at the hem. A fisherman nearby looked at me for a moment, probably wondering what kind of bride ends up alone by the sea the day after her wedding, but he said nothing. I was grateful for that. Pity was unbearable when you were already drowning in it. I replayed every sign I'd ignored. The late-night phone calls he dismissed as work. The moments he'd gone quiet mid-conversation, lost somewhere I couldn't follow. The distance in his eyes when I tried to talk about the future. It all seems so obvious now. Love makes you blind, they say, but I think it's worse than that. It makes you willingly close your eyes. My phone buzzed in my bag. I didn't have to check to know it was him. I could almost hear the message he'd send. An apology wrapped in excuses, words carefully chosen to sound sincere but not incriminating. Daniel had always been good with words, soft, convincing, capable of making lies sound like love letters. I ignored it. The sea was calmer than my heart, but at least it was honest in its restlessness. I watched the waves crash and retreat, always coming back, even when they didn't want to. Maybe that was love too, always returning to what hurts you most. By evening, I was sitting in a small cafe near the station, staring into a cup of untouched coffee. The waitress had stopped asking if I needed anything else. People came and went, laughing, living. I felt like I was watching them through glass, part of the world but not really in it. Then my phone rang again. Same number. I turned it face down on the table, but this time I didn't silence it. I listened to it ring out, once, twice, 3 times, until the sound faded. Minutes later, a message appeared. Just one line. "Please don't disappear like this. I need to explain." I didn't reply. What was there left to explain? The truth had already spoken for itself in whispers and midnight laughter. Still, as I sat there, the ache inside me shifted. It wasn't just heartbreak anymore. It was something darker, sharper, curiosity. Because as much as I wanted to hate him, as much as I wanted to move on, I couldn't stop wondering who he'd been with, and why, of all nights, it had to be our wedding night. As the cafe lights flickered on and dusk crept in, I made a quiet promise to myself. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to beg for honesty or chase after explanations, but I was going to find out the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The next morning, I woke up to a pale light slipping through the curtains of the small guest room at my mother's house. The air smelled like old perfume and nostalgia, lavender soap, coffee from the kitchen, the faint scent of my father's books that still lined the hallway. I hadn't planned to come here, but at midnight, after hours of walking, my feet had led me to the only place that still felt safe. My mother didn't ask questions when she opened the door and saw me standing there in my wrinkled dress, with eyes swollen from crying. She just pulled me into her arms, held me for a long time, and whispered, "You don't have to talk yet." That broke me. The tears came in waves until I couldn't breathe. But somehow, being held by her made it a little easier to exist. Later that morning, I sat in the kitchen, staring at the cup of tea she'd made. The steam curled up like tiny ghosts. My phone was on the table, silent but heavy with unread messages. I didn't want to open them, but part of me, stubborn, desperate, foolish, needed to know if he had something new to say, something that could make sense of the ruin. When I finally unlocked it, I found only 2 messages. The first was from Daniel, sent at dawn. "Please, just talk to me. I never meant to hurt you." The second was from a number I didn't recognize. "If you want the truth about your husband, Meet me tonight at Cafe Orion. Don't tell anyone." My heart stopped. My first thought was that it had to be a cruel joke, but the tone of the message, cold, direct, felt too real, too deliberate. I read it again and again until the words blurred. My mother noticed the change in my face. "Juliet?" she asked quietly. "What is it?" I shook my head and forced a small smile. "Nothing, Mom. Just spam." But I couldn't let it go. All day, the message haunted me. Who could it be? A friend of his? The woman from that night? Someone who knew more than I did? Every possibility twisted like a knife. By evening, I found myself standing in front of Cafe Orion, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might give me away. The cafe was dimly lit, its sign flickering like it was trying to disappear. Inside, the smell of roasted coffee mixed with rain-soaked air. I sat by the window, pretending to read the menu while scanning the room. Then a woman approached my table. She was around my age, maybe a little younger, with a face that looked both tired and determined. "You're Juliet," she said softly. I nodded, my throat dry. She sat down without asking and slid an envelope across the table. "You don't know me," she said, "but I know Daniel. Or at least I used to." My hands trembled as I touched the envelope. "Who are you?" I whispered. She looked at me with something that wasn't quite pity. "Let's just say," she said, her voice low, "you're not the first woman he's done this to." In that moment, my breath caught. The room felt smaller, the walls closer. I didn't open the envelope, not yet. But deep down, I knew that whatever was inside would change everything. And somehow, I wasn't sure I wanted to know. The envelope sat between us like a loaded weapon. My fingers hovered over it, trembling, but I didn't open it right away. The woman, whose name was Mara, she later told me, kept her gaze steady, though I could see the flicker of guilt behind her calm expression. She was nervous, too, maybe afraid, maybe remembering something she'd rather forget. "You were married to him?" I asked quietly. She shook her head. "No, but I loved him once, and I thought he loved me." Her eyes lowered to the table, "until the night he disappeared without a word, just like he did to you." The words sliced through me like glass. It felt strange hearing them spoken by someone else, as if she had stolen my pain and made it her own. I wanted to deny it, to insist my story was different, but how could I? Every sign, every cold glance, every empty excuse suddenly made sense in a new, horrifying way. Mara leaned closer, her voice trembling. "I don't know what he told you about his past, but Daniel has done this before." More than once, she hesitated, then added, "And every time, he leaves the same way, after the wedding night." My pulse roared in my ears. "Why are you telling me this?" I whispered. Her lips trembled. "Because I thought I was crazy when it happened to me." No one believed me, and when I saw your wedding pictures online, She stopped, taking a shaky breath. "I couldn't let you go through it blind like I did." The envelope suddenly felt heavier. I slid it open slowly, half afraid of what I'd find. Inside were photographs, grainy, old, some printed from emails. Daniel with other women, different weddings, different dresses, always smiling the same hollow smile. One picture made my hand freeze. Daniel standing beside a woman in a white dress, his arm around her waist, looking at her the same way he'd looked at me when he said, "You're my forever." Only this photo wasn't taken years ago. It was dated 6 months before our wedding. My stomach twisted. "This can't be real," I said, shaking my head. He wouldn't. But I couldn't finish the sentence, because deep down, I knew he would. He had. Mara reached into her bag again and pulled out a small USB drive. "There's more," she said. "Emails, messages, records of the payments he took from the women. I think he's been marrying them for money, or worse. I stared at her, my mind a blur. Why not go to the police? I asked. Her eyes darted to the window, scanning the street outside. Because he finds people who do. I don't know how, but he does. I've moved 3 times since I left him. You need to be careful, Juliet. You have no idea what he's capable of. Her warning echoed in my mind long after she left. I sat there, alone. The photos spread across the table like a mosaic of betrayal. The cafe had emptied, the barista cleaning quietly in the corner, the rain tapping against the glass like a restless ghost. When I finally gathered the photos and tucked them into my bag, I caught my reflection in the window. I barely recognized myself, eyes red, face pale, a woman hollowed out by love's cruel disguise. But somewhere inside that reflection, a spark flickered, a quiet, simmering rage. I stood up, heart pounding. If Daniel had made a life out of breaking women, he'd chosen the wrong one this time, because I wasn't going to be his next forgotten story. I was going to be his ending. That night, I couldn't sleep. The rain kept falling, a slow, endless whisper against my window, as if the sky itself knew too much. The photos lay spread out on my bed, lit by the dim glow of my bedside lamp. Every image burned into my memory. Daniel's smile, that same practiced tenderness, the same hollow promise in his eyes. I kept asking myself why I hadn't seen it, why I'd ignored all the signs, the distance, the half-answers. The way he sometimes looked at me was like he was memorizing my face before disappearing. The next morning, I drove to the address listed on one of the older photographs. It was a small town an hour away, the kind of place people vanish to when they want to be forgotten. My heart pounded as I parked outside a pale blue house that looked eerily familiar, the same picket fence, the same red mailbox as in the photo. I hesitated for a moment before walking up the path. A woman opened the door before I could knock. She looked older than in the picture, her hair shorter, her eyes dull with exhaustion. But I recognized her instantly, one of the brides. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Then she sighed and stepped aside. "You must be the new one," she said quietly. Inside, the house smelled like dust and cinnamon. Children's drawings lined the walls, and on the mantel sat a wedding photo, her and Daniel, frozen in time, smiling. "I thought he was dead," she said bitterly, pouring 2 cups of coffee. "That's what he told me before he left, that he had cancer. He even made me sign papers transferring the house to him, said it was for security, and then he was gone." Her words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the cup tightly to stop my hands from trembling. "You never saw him again?" I asked. She shook her head. "Until last week," she whispered. "He showed up at my store, pretending not to know me. He called himself David. Different last name. But those eyes." She looked at me, her voice breaking. "You don't forget eyes like his." I felt the room tilt. My heart was racing so fast it hurt. "He's still doing it," I said. "Still finding women." "Still lying." She nodded slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "He doesn't just lie, Juliet. He studies you. He knows what you want, what you fear, what you'll forgive. And when he's done," she swallowed hard, "he leaves you with nothing." I wanted to run, to escape the nightmare that kept unfolding, but I stayed, because I had to know how deep it went. "Do you have anything?" "Proof?" I asked. She stood, opened a drawer, and pulled out a small metal box. Inside were documents, old photos, bank records, and more pieces of the puzzle. She pushed it toward me. "Take it," she said. "Finish what I couldn't." As I left her house, the wind picked up, cold and sharp. I clutched the box to my chest and looked down the long, empty street. For the first time, I wasn't just afraid, I was furious. Whatever secret Daniel was running from, I was going to find it, even if it destroyed me. The drive back home felt longer than it should have. The storm had stopped, but the roads were still wet, reflecting the streetlights like broken glass. I kept one hand on the wheel and the other on the small metal box beside me. Every bump on the road made it rattle softly, a chilling reminder of the truth it carried. I couldn't bring myself to open it yet. I was afraid of what I'd find inside, afraid of finally seeing the man I had loved stripped bare of all illusion. When I reached home, dawn was creeping over the horizon. The world looked deceptively calm, painted in soft pinks and golds, as if mocking the chaos inside me. I placed the box on the table, made a pot of coffee, and sat down in silence. My fingers brushed over the cold metal until I finally unlatched it. Inside were neatly folded documents, old letters, and several small envelopes tied with red string. One had my name on it. My breath caught. The handwriting was unmistakable. Daniel's. I opened it slowly. The first line made my heart stop. "If you're reading this, Juliet, it means you've found out who I am." My hands trembled as I continued. "I didn't mean to fall in love with you. You were supposed to be another transaction, one more step before I could finally disappear. But you changed that. You made me feel again, and I hated you for it because it made leaving harder." I stopped reading for a moment, pressing the letter to my chest. My heart was breaking all over again, but beneath the pain, something darker stirred. Anger. He had planned it. Every kiss, every promise, every word of love, all of it had been calculated. The letter continued. "There are things you don't understand, things that could get you hurt if you keep digging. Please, Juliet, stop looking for me. Forget me." Forget him? As if that were even possible. Inside were bank transfers totaling $847,000, IDs under 7 different names, marriage certificates from different towns spanning 2019 to 2024, and police reports from 3 counties. Daniel, or whatever his real name was, had been doing this for years. He'd stolen $92,000 from Sarah Chen in Portland, $134,000 from Rachel Morrison in Austin, and even a $67,000 trust fund meant for a widow's teenage son. The pattern was clear: charm, marry, vanish. Each woman was left with debts, confusion, and a trail of broken promises. As I stared at the evidence, I realized something else. The last transfer, dated 3 months ago, showed $58,000 wired to an account under a name I recognized. Mara Williams, the woman who'd come to warn me. For a moment, my world tilted. She had said she wanted to protect me, but what if she was part of it? What if she and Daniel were in this together? My chest tightened as suspicion slithered through my thoughts. I grabbed my phone and opened the text she'd sent me, the one with the address where we met. I tried calling. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. I drove to her apartment later that evening, my pulse quick and uneven. The hallway lights flickered as I climbed the stairs. When I reached her door, it was already ajar. My stomach dropped. I pushed it open slowly. The apartment was empty, too empty. No furniture, no photos, no signs that anyone had lived there. Just a single envelope sitting on the floor by the window. My name was on it again. I knelt, picked it up, and unfolded the note inside. One sentence. "You were never supposed to find out?" The paper slipped from my hand. The room spun. I didn't know who I could trust anymore. Not Daniel, not Mara, not even myself. All I knew was that someone was still watching. And whoever it was, they didn't want me getting any closer to the truth. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch with the letter on the coffee table, reading it again and again until the words blurred into nothing. The quiet of the house pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. Every sound, the ticking clock, the hum of the refrigerator, felt amplified, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for me to break. At some point, I realized I was trembling, not from fear, but from a kind of rage that felt too calm to be normal. By sunrise, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to be another one of Daniel's ghosts. I wasn't going to disappear into his story. I got dressed, grabbed the box, and drove to the police station. My hands were steady as I walked inside, but my heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst through my chest. The officer at the front desk looked up from his computer when I approached. "Ma'am, how can I help you?" he asked. "I have information about a man who isn't who he says he is," I said, setting the box on the counter. "His name is Daniel Roberts. Or at least, that's one of them." He raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical, but when I opened the box and showed him the IDs, the marriage certificates, and the letters, his expression changed. He called for a detective. Within minutes, I was sitting in a small, cold room with a cup of coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink. The detective introduced herself as Detective Ward. She was calm, patient, but her eyes were sharp. "You're saying your husband was living under false identities?" she asked. "Yes," I said, forcing the word out. "And I think he's still out there, doing it to someone else." She leafed through the documents quietly, her brow furrowing deeper with each page. "Some of these names are familiar," she murmured. "We've had missing persons reports tied to one of these aliases." My stomach twisted. "Missing persons?" She nodded slowly. "2 women. Both married to a man who fits this description. Both vanished within months of the wedding." The room felt smaller suddenly. I gripped the edge of the chair to stop my hands from shaking. "Do you think he—" I couldn't finish the sentence. Detective Ward looked at me for a long moment. "We can't say for sure yet," she said softly, "but if what you're telling us is true, this man might be much more dangerous than you realize." I left the station in a daze. The sun was already high, glaring off the windshields in the parking lot, but I felt cold. I stood by my car, watching people come and go, their lives simple, ordinary. I envied them. I used to be like that, before Daniel, before the lies, before the silence on my wedding night that started it all. That night, I received a call. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering, but something in me needed to hear it. "Juliet," a man's voice said. Calm, smooth, too familiar. My breath caught. "Daniel?" He chuckled softly, almost tenderly. "You should have left it alone." My hand tightened on the phone. "Where are you?" "Closer than you think," he whispered. Then the line went dead. I stood frozen, the phone pressed to my ear, my pulse roaring in my head. My first instinct was to run, but a strange calm settled over me instead. He wanted me afraid. That was his power. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I walked to the window, staring out into the dark street. Somewhere out there, he was watching. And for the first time, I decided I would watch back. The days that followed blurred together. I kept my curtains closed and my lights dimmed, jumping at every sound outside. At night, I'd hear footsteps on the gravel or the faint creak of the gate. I told myself it was the wind, or maybe my mind playing tricks, but deep down, I knew better. Daniel was out there somewhere, watching, waiting. I barely left the house except to buy groceries or check in with Detective Ward, who'd started visiting every few days. She said the investigation was growing, that other women were coming forward with similar stories. Some had letters, others had bank statements. One had a scar, she said, he gave her. It was strange, comforting, in a painful way, to know I wasn't alone. But it also made everything worse. He wasn't just a liar. He was a predator, and I had been one of his chosen victims. One evening, as I was closing the bakery early, I noticed a black car parked across the street. The windows were tinted, the engine still running. I stared for a few seconds before locking the door and pretending not to notice. When I got home, the car followed me, not close enough to seem obvious, but enough that I could see its headlights in my rearview mirror the entire way. I parked in front of my house, heart hammering. The car slowed, paused for a moment, then drove off. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in bed clutching my phone, waiting for something, a call, a noise, anything. At 2:37 a.m., it came. A text, no name, just a message that said, "Still baking late, Juliet?" My body went cold. I ran to the window, but the street was empty. The only sound was the wind brushing through the trees. I tried calling Detective Ward, but it went straight to voicemail. My hands shook so badly I could barely type a reply. "Who is this?" I sent. No response. An hour later, another message came. "I missed the smell of your flan." I dropped the phone. I could almost hear his voice behind those words, the same soft tone he used to whisper in my ear on quiet mornings when I thought we were happy. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come out. Instead, I locked every door, turned off my lights, and sat in the darkness waiting for dawn. When Detective Ward arrived the next morning, I showed her the messages. She frowned, her jaw tight. "These came from a burner phone," she said. "Untraceable. But this means he's nearby." I looked out the window again. The black car was gone, but I could still feel his eyes somewhere beyond the trees. "What if he tries to come back?" I whispered. "He won't," she said, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "We'll keep patrols near your home. Just don't engage if he contacts you again." I nodded, but the truth was, I didn't believe her. People like Daniel didn't just disappear. They slipped between lives like smoke, impossible to catch, impossible to kill. That night, as I closed the curtains again, something on the windowsill caught my eye. A single red rose, freshly cut, still glistening with dew. My throat tightened. I hadn't planted roses in years. I opened the window, my heart pounding, and looked out into the street. The air was still, quiet. But in the distance, just under the flickering streetlight, I saw him, a man in a dark coat, standing perfectly still, watching my house. I didn't scream, I didn't move, I just whispered to myself, "I'm not afraid of you anymore." But deep down, I knew it wasn't true. Morning came with a silence that felt too heavy to belong to daylight. The rose from the night before lay wilted on the kitchen counter, its petals curling inward like it was mourning something too. I hadn't slept. Every creak of the house felt like a threat. Every shadow carried his shape. I wanted to believe I was safe, but the truth was, safety felt like a memory I could no longer touch. Detective Ward called just after sunrise. "We got a lead," she said, her voice clipped and tired. "A witness saw someone matching his description near the river last night." "He's moving, Juliet. He knows we're closing in." For a second, I let myself breathe. Maybe this nightmare would finally end. But then her words sank deeper. "He's moving." That meant he was still free, still watching, still choosing where to go next. My stomach twisted. "What if he comes back?" I asked. "Then we'll be ready," she said, "but I need you to stay calm. Don't go anywhere alone, not even the bakery." I promised I wouldn't, but promises were easy when you were desperate to sound brave. That afternoon, I went to the bakery anyway. I told myself I needed normalcy, something warm, something sweet, something that didn't smell like fear. The bell above the door chimed when I walked in, and for a moment it almost felt like life again. Until I saw the note. It was sitting on the counter beside the cash register, folded neatly. My name was written in his handwriting, the same looping script I used to trace with my finger on our wedding cards. My throat went dry. I looked around the shop. Empty. Quiet. I unfolded it slowly. "You shouldn't have gone to the police. You promised forever." I stumbled back, heart racing. The walls felt like they were closing in. I wanted to scream, but the air refused to come. I locked the doors, drew the blinds, and called Ward. When she arrived minutes later, she didn't even knock, just burst through the back door, gun drawn. She read the note, her face hardening. "He's taunting you," she said. "He wants control back." I could barely whisper. "He's winning." "No," she said, her voice sharp. "He's unraveling." People like him always do before they fall apart completely. Her words should have comforted me, but they didn't. Because when I looked at the note again, I saw something else. A faint fingerprint smudged on the corner. It wasn't just a message. It was proof. He'd been close enough to touch the counter, to breathe the same air I did. That night, the patrol car stayed outside my house. I could see the faint red and blue glow through the curtains. It should have made me feel safe. It didn't. Every light seemed too bright, every silence too deep. Around midnight, I heard it again, a sound that didn't belong. A tap. Then another. I turned toward the window. The curtains fluttered slightly, like someone had brushed against them. My breath caught in my chest. Then came the whisper, soft, almost gentle. Juliet. I froze. That voice. It was him. The patrol car's headlights flashed, and suddenly the whisper was gone. I ran outside barefoot, screaming for them to look, to chase, to do something. But the street was empty. Only the wind, only the night. When I went back inside, the curtains were still moving, and on the window pane, drawn faintly through the condensation, was a heart. A broken one. That's when I finally understood. He didn't just want me afraid. He wanted me to remember. I hadn't heard from Detective Ward all day, and that silence gnawed at me. Around dusk, I checked the windows again, even though I knew it didn't matter. If he wanted in, he'd find a way. That's when I saw it, a single rose on the porch, not in a vase, not wrapped, just there, like a reminder. I didn't go outside to pick it up. I couldn't. I only stared at it through the glass, my pulse a wild drumbeat in my ears. 2 days before Detective Ward called about the sighting at the river, I received a package. No return address. Just my name, scrawled in familiar handwriting that I couldn't quite place. Inside was a small USB drive and a folded note. He's not working alone. Watch your back. A friend. For a long moment, I just stared at it, heart hammering. Then I plugged it in, hands trembling as the screen came to life. A grainy security feed from the inn, our wedding night. My stomach twisted before my mind could even process what I was seeing. He was there, my husband, his arm around a woman. She was laughing, her face turned slightly toward the camera, hair falling just enough to hide her smile. But then she looked up, and I froze. It was Mara. The same Mara who had cried with me, who had told me he was dangerous. The same Mara whose apartment I'd found empty, whose number had gone dead, whose disappearance I'd mourned like a sister lost too soon. My blood ran cold. Every instinct I had screamed denial, but the footage didn't lie. She wasn't just in the story, she'd been writing it with him. The whispers, the warnings, the conveniently timed information, it was all bait. A setup so carefully laid that I'd never even questioned it. I'd trusted her. I'd let her in. And she'd used me. I clicked through the rest of the footage, each frame driving the knife deeper. They were together that night, laughing, whispering, counting money. My money. The $58,000 transfer that had almost destroyed me wasn't theft. It was payment. It was all a con. Love, friendship, betrayal, all part of the same act. By the time the video ended, I couldn't breathe. The walls felt too close, the air too heavy. I called Ward immediately, my voice shaking. "Detective, I know who his accomplice is." There was silence on the other end, then Ward's voice, steady, sharp. "Say her name." "Mara." A pause, then the sound of papers rustling. "That explains a lot," Ward murmured. "We found 2 passports in his belongings, but one name didn't match anyone in our system. Mara could be an alias. I'll put a team on it." The line went dead, and for a split second, the silence was louder than any scream. Then the world around me snapped back into motion. I grabbed my coat, my keys, my phone, anything to keep my hands from shaking. I wasn't going to sit still this time. Ward had said she'd put a team on it, but I'd spent too long waiting for other people to save me. If Mara was still out there, I needed to see her face again, to ask her why, to make her look me in the eye and tell me how easily she'd watched me fall apart while she pocketed the pieces. By the time I got to the edge of town, night had swallowed the streets. Rain slicked the pavement, and headlights bled into the darkness. My phone buzzed. Ward. "Where are you?" "Near the old pier," I said. "Don't ask why, I just need to—"
"Mara's on the move," Ward cut in. "We traced her car heading your direction. Do not engage, you hear me? We've got units closing in."
But it was too late. A black sedan rounded the corner ahead of me, tires slicing through puddles. The driver's window rolled down, and for one dizzy second, the face inside met mine. Mara. Her expression didn't flicker, not surprise, not guilt, just a calculation. Then the car sped up. I floored the accelerator, following the taillights through the rain, heart pounding so hard I could taste it. Ward's voice crackled through the phone, but I couldn't make out the words. All I saw was that familiar silhouette, the same woman who'd once wrapped her arms around me while I cried over him. The chase cut through the industrial district, abandoned warehouses, flickering street lamps, echoes of thunder overhead. When Mara's car skidded into a side alley, I braked hard and jumped out. She was already halfway out of the vehicle, her coat flaring like wings in the wind. "Mara!" I shouted. She froze for a heartbeat, then turned slowly, rain tracing down her face like tears she didn't deserve. "Why?" My voice broke against the storm. "Why me?" She smiled, cold, hollow. "Because you were easy. Because he loved how much you believed in happy endings." Before I could respond, headlights flooded the alley from behind. Police sirens wailed in the distance, closing fast. Ward's car screeched to a halt, her voice echoing through the storm. "Hands where I can see them!" Mara bolted. Ward sprinted after her, shouting commands. I stood frozen for a second, then followed instinct, my heels slipping on the wet ground as I gave chase. The alley curved toward the docks, where the sea roared against the rocks. I could see Mara's silhouette ahead, framed against the lightning, trapped between the water and Ward's gun. Mara's eyes darted toward me, wild and desperate. "You think this ends with me?" she spat. "You don't even know half of what he was doing." "You never will." Her hand twitched toward her coat pocket, but Ward was faster. A single gunshot cracked through the night. Mara crumpled, her scream swallowed by the thunder. Ward rushed forward, shouting into her radio, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, the world tilting in slow motion, rain and tears blurring into one. As they cuffed Mara's still-breathing body and pulled her to her feet, I finally exhaled. The rain washed the dirt from my hands, the blood from the ground, the fear from my lungs. The rain didn't stop that night. Even after the sirens faded and Ward's car disappeared down the pier, I stood there, soaked, trembling, watching the dark waves crash against the docks like they were trying to erase what had just happened. Ward told me to go home, to rest. She promised to handle the rest, but rest wasn't something I knew how to do anymore. I went back to my apartment, peeled off the wet clothes, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. There were shadows under my eyes that hadn't been there before, the kind that don't come from sleepless nights, but from waking up to the truth. Mara was gone. She wasn't the ghost I'd made her into. She was flesh and blood and betrayal, caught, handcuffed, and driven away under the weight of her own lies. And yet she wasn't the one who haunted me most. Daniel was still out there. He didn't know. He didn't know that the web he'd spun had started to collapse, that the woman he'd trusted had already turned into evidence. Ward said they'd take a few days before going for him, build a stronger case, tie the last loose ends. But part of me wanted it to happen now. I wanted him to feel what I'd felt, the creeping dread, the slow realization that every secret you think is buried is already bleeding through the surface. The next morning, Ward called. Her tone was different, calm, methodical, but with a sharp edge that hinted something big was coming. "We have her confession," she said. "Mara talked. Not much, but enough. Your husband doesn't know yet. He's been laying low, probably thinks he got away clean. I could hear the pages turning on her desk, the faint hum of voices in the background. "When we move in, I'll call you," she added. "You deserve to know when it's done." I hung up, my pulse steady for the first time in months. The city felt different that day, quieter, almost like it was holding its breath. I went back to the places I'd avoided, the cafe where he first kissed me, the bridge where he'd promised me forever. Each spot felt like a lie finally unmasked. And then, 3 nights later, Ward kept her promise. I was at home when the call came, her voice firm, almost breathless.
"Juliet?"
Ward's voice came, fast, urgent.
"We found him. Near the old bridge. I need you to come identify him before we make the arrest. Positive ID from a victim carries weight."
20 minutes later, I stood behind police barricades, rain soaking through my coat. Floodlights cut through the darkness. And there he was, Daniel, hands raised, shirt torn, eyes wild as 3 officers closed in. Our eyes met across the distance. For a moment, his face softened, almost pleading. Then Ward stepped forward. "Daniel Roberts, also known as David Mitchell, Marcus Webb, and James Hernandez, you're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and suspicion of involvement in 2 missing persons cases." The handcuffs clicked. Camera flashes erupted from the news crews that had gathered. I watched them load him into the patrol car, his head bowed, finally caught. Ward turned to me, rain dripping from her cap. "It's over. He can't hurt anyone else now." He tried to swim across the river, made it halfway before exhaustion pulled him under. We dragged him out, coughing and shaking. He kept saying your name. Ward touched my shoulder gently. "You're free now," she whispered. But freedom didn't feel like what I thought it would. It wasn't peace. It wasn't closure. It was just quiet. The kind that comes after a storm, when the world looks the same, but nothing feels familiar. Inside, the house waited for me, the ghost of a wedding, the silence of a love that had rotted from the inside out. I walked through it one last time, room by room, until I reached the window where the heart had been drawn. The condensation was gone now, but I could still see its outline faintly, like a scar that refuses to fade. The morning after they took him away, I woke to sunlight spilling through my bedroom window. For the first time in months, the silence wasn't suffocating. It was mine. I drove to the bakery, unlocked the door, and baked the lemon cake I'd dropped weeks ago. This time, my hands didn't shake.
Detective Ward called that afternoon. 6 more women came forward. Your testimony is going to put him away for 20 years minimum. I thanked her and hung up. Justice had arrived, quiet and final.
The nightmare was over, and the life ahead, uncertain but honest, was finally mine to build. Thanks for spending time with this story. If it resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Someone else may need to hear it too. Watch another real-life journey by clicking on the left, and subscribe so you never miss what comes next.